It seems nobody likes to talk about suicide. Well, that's part of the problem. Nobody talks about it until it's too late. Half the battle in tackling a problem is realizing there is one.
He was a great kid.
She was really funny.
He was the class clown.
She loved music. She loved friends.
He always wanted to help others.
Great memories of friends and loved ones. Unfortunately, that's all that's left of Dylan Muldoon and Hannah Wathen memories. May 19th, 2015, 2 days before high school graduation, this Hannibal High senior took her own life. 6 months later, Quincy Senior High student Dylan Muldoon met the same fate. 2 different teenagers in different cities with different circumstances, but the same outcome, suicide.
This is not the rest of your life. You know, this is not a good experience right now. You will get past this.
Dr. Jessica Patel is a certified clinical psychologist with Quincy Medical Group. She says the #1 weapon in preventing suicide, talking about it.
Anytime anyone makes a comment regarding possible what we call suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts, it needs to be taken seriously.
Even if it's said in a joking manner, human brains don't fully mature until about 25 years old, so for kids, joking about suicide could be a call for help or a way for them to test the waters, so to speak. If someone says something like this to you, take it seriously and ask more questions.
I would ask them what the thoughts are, you know, what's going on, how they're feeling. Honestly, as a professional, the next question that we ask is, do they have a plan?
If they do, you should call 911 or take them straight to the emergency room. If there is no definite plan, that person still needs to see a doctor. You can start with your general practitioner. Part of the issue is also the stigma that's associated with mental health.
Mental health is not something bad. If I had diabetes, I would be getting help. I would go to the hospital, I would go to a clinician and get help. The same is for mental health, you know, but there's this stigma behind it, that you're crazy.
Dr. Patel says at least 1 in 3 people have some sort of mental illness. Now, there's nothing to be ashamed of in seeking help. She also adds that if you've had treatment for mental illness, you can be a big asset to helping others if you share your story. And start young. She says instilling coping mechanisms in kids as young as preschool will help them as they grow and develop into teenagers and adults.
Dr. Jessica Patel says she's done suicide risk assessments on kids as young as 6. She also says when seeking professional help, you need to make sure the therapist is trained in cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy. She says those 2 therapies have the best long-term outcomes. If you're not sure if your mental health professional is trained in that therapy, just ask. May 19th, 2015, Hannibal High School senior Hannah Wathen was 2 days away from graduation. In the fall, she was set to go to medical school. Her family tells me she loved helping people. Her family and friends were devastated to find out with absolutely no warning on a Tuesday morning, Hannah had taken her own life.
Before they took her body from the house, I said to her that it wasn't that bad. Nothing was ever that bad.
11 months after burying the youngest of 3 daughters, Bob Wathen looks at life differently these days. He doesn't sweat the small stuff, but he doesn't take the time he's given for granted. His entire family now knows the value of time. Wathen's daughter Hannah had gotten into a little bit of trouble during a senior graduation tradition. Hannah wasn't a troublemaker, and when she got caught drinking, she took it hard.
In her mind, she felt like she had messed up.
Hannah's parents sat her down on the couch in the early morning hours of May 19th to talk about what had happened. Bob tells me it wasn't a heated discussion, it was just talking. They went to bed thinking the conversation would continue the next day. That conversation would never happen because Hannah committed suicide after her parents left for work that day.
One of the things you're going to hear from us, Chad, repeatedly is that there is nothing that can't be fixed. This is not a solution for anything, and for whatever reason, she got up the next morning and thought her future was ruined.
There's nothing that you can do that is not redeemable.
The Wathens tell me they're doing as well as anybody could be following a suicide. The family unit is tighter than it was before, and they give a lot of credit to their healing, to their faith. One of Hannah's older sisters, Stephanie, told me she had actually been an atheist for about 3 years before Hannah's death. In fact, she says she was saved 2 months before Hannah died. She also shared with me that Hannah's suicide was not the family's first bout.
The moment that I was contemplating suicide, I remember, and I told myself, I don't ever want to forget how alone I feel in this moment. And I thought about my kids, and I thought about the effect it would have on my boys, and I didn't want anyone else raising them. But it was at that moment when I felt so alone that for the first time in years, I said, okay, if there's anything else out there, God, if you're real, now's the time to show me because I need you. And that's the point where he came in, and I thank God for that low every day. I guess if I have any advice, it's when you get to that low, don't see that as your final destination. When you're down that low, look up.
For Hannah's sister, Stephanie, May 19th was like any other day. She had seen her sister the night before and talked about graduating and going off to college.
Our world stopped, and we're confused, and we're trying to figure out how to move forward. But when you think about it, and when I think about her, I mean, there's no words for how much I miss her.
Especially since Hannah has 2 nieces and 2 nephews who won't remember her.
Our babies are growing up without their aunt, and I mean, Hannah was a cool aunt.
Just 2 days after Hannah's funeral, Hannah's sister Christina and her husband found out some good news. After battling infertility issues, she found out she was pregnant with their second daughter.
Hannah's middle name was Elizabeth, and that's our daughter's first name. We named her Elizabeth.
Nice.
We call her Lizzie.
During my time with the Wathen family, they told me faith has been a huge part in their healing. So too has a scholarship that has been set up in Hannah's memory. This graduation, 2 Hannibal seniors who are going into the medical field will each get $1,000. The Wathens told me they thought they'd get enough money for a scholarship to last a couple of years. Turns out they now have enough money to last at least 10 years. You can learn a lot from walking a mile in someone else's shoes. The longer the walk, the more you can learn. This morning, we take a journey in someone's shoes that's not going to be a very pleasant walk, but we think it has to be heard. We continue our special series, Shattering the Silence, now by introducing you to Stephanie Norris, a 5-time survivor of suicide.
I am bipolar.
This is what can help prevent suicide. Dr. Jessica Patel, a certified clinical psychologist with Quincy Medical Group, says the stigma against mental illness is getting better, but there is still a long way to go.
If you've gotten mental health services and someone comes to you, sharing your own experiences with them and normalizing that experience is huge.
Stephanie Norris agrees. That's why she wanted to do this interview.
Speaking out and helping others, so I mean, I guess to a point where I'm comfortable with what I've done and how it's affected me.
Stephanie began struggling with mental illness and suicidal thoughts a couple of years ago. Her last attempt was more than 6 months ago.
How are you doing now?
I'm doing a lot better than I have been in the past. I'm going to therapy. I'm on medication for everything.
Stephanie talked to me about what it's like to be in her dark place.
And that dark place that you are in is beyond the scariest place that I have ever been in my life. Once you get down there that low and you feel like that's the only answer, you don't think about anything else. You only think about getting that relief from that dark place that you're in.
She also talks about being hospitalized for her mental illness. She said it helped in a huge way and wants to spread the word that treatment for mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of.
It's not a bad place. It's actually pretty fun. They make it fun. They know that you don't want to be there. They're trained to help you out.
As Stephanie says, her outlook on life now is much more positive. She offers this advice. If you feel like you're in that dark place, she says, just reach out, say something to somebody and get help. She says no one is ever truly alone. And actually, every family I've talked to for this series says pretty much the same thing. Suicide is a permanent fix to a temporary problem. Tomorrow morning, I'll show you what's left behind for the family after a loved one commits suicide. 18-year-old Dylan Muldoon was explained to me as the class clown, always wanting to make others laugh. In fact, one person told me he would get right in your face and wouldn't leave you alone until you smiled. Well, sadly, down deep inside, Dylan wasn't smiling at all, but was in a very dark place few people journey. And sadly, his journey ended November 6th, 2015.
If he would have just paused, just taken that extra second and not pulled that trigger.
Dawn Whitcomb is Dylan Muldoon's mother.
Dylan was my only child, and I won't have the graduation, and I won't have a wedding, and I won't have grandchildren.
What she does have are memories of her son, memories that make her smile.
He was kind, he was compassionate, he always wanted to help others.
And he is still helping others with Dawn's help. She has now helped start a program at Quincy Senior High School. The committee is set to get a permanent initiative at the school. She says there are DARE programs, sex ed requirements. Why not have a suicide prevention program?
If we can help just one kid to just stop and think before they try to do anything to themselves, that's all that matters to me.
Dawn tells me she knew Dylan struggled. She says she began noticing changes when Dylan was in about the 7th grade. He had been hospitalized, he was in therapy, and was on medication. However, Dylan and Dawn weren't that open about the struggles with anyone else.
I think the bottom line, though, is, when people do feel like that and, are feeling those feelings, they just want to be heard. They just want somebody to listen to them. Not to say, well, you need to do this or you need to do that, but just to sit back and listen.
When school starts up in the fall, that committee that Dawn helped start is kicking off Suicide Prevention Week. National speakers are coming in from Project Semicolon and No Stigmas to talk to students and give them a chance to do personal breakout sessions. Tomorrow, we'll introduce you to another family who was dealing with the loss of a loved one. This student had no warning signs and zero history of mental illness. The families we've showcased this week have opened their hearts to share their stories on suicide prevention. The interviews, I'm not gonna lie, were tough. Together, we relived what is easily the worst day of their life. All of them told me suicide is a long-term fix to a short-term problem. We give you this final piece tonight to show you what's left behind for the family after a loved one takes their own life.
She's forever changed because of the decisions that I have made. I don't think she's ever going to be the same again.
Stephanie Norris is a suicide survivor. She's talking about her younger sister who's now changed. Changed because she saw her older sister on her deathbed. Stephanie is also changed. She's attempted suicide 5 times and now has a different look on her life. Luckily, these 2 sisters can take this change and move forward.
Our babies are growing up without their aunt.
For sisters Christina Merrill and Stephanie Wathen, it's a different story. Their youngest sister, Hannah, took her own life 11 months ago.
The missing and the hurting doesn't just branch out to the loss of Hannah. I hurt for my family. I hurt for her friends. It reaches to so many areas.
I don't think if she would have thought it through, she couldn't have thought about how much it would hurt her family and her friends.
A common theme among these families, problems can be fixed no matter how big. Death is permanent. 18-year-old Dylan Muldoon suffered with mental illness for years and took his own life in November of 2015. His mother, Dawn Whitcomb.
Wow, what have I learned? I've learned that you need to take every life in your life not for granted. That one day we could be here, and we're not.
Now Whitcomb suffers from guilt and PTSD because she's the one who found Dylan after he shot himself. She does go to a support group and is adjusting to life without her son.
Dylan was my only child, and I won't have the graduation, and I won't have a wedding, and I won't have grandchildren.
All because of a split-second decision made at the hands of a teenager. Whitcomb says the pain never goes away. The Wathens reinforce that.
There will always be somebody that misses you. I think in the moment when you're contemplating suicide, you feel alone, and that can tend to be what pushes you forward. You're never that alone. There is somebody that will miss you and that loves you.
They're robbing us of things, you know. I don't get to walk down the aisle. I don't get to have that daddy-daughter dance. I don't get to see a young man look into her eyes and she is his world. I don't get to see that because she wasn't thinking of those things. She couldn't see past this, and it's what I want people to realize, to think of those things and to look past the moment. Nothing's that bad.
I just want to take a second to thank these families for being so open and so honest and willing to share their stories. If you've missed any of these pieces or want more information, including resources about suicide prevention, go now to KHQA.com.